Hello, MEP Girling. First of all, can I apologise for not being there to speak to you in person, but as you can imagine, being on oxygen makes such journeys quite difficult. My name's Vanessa Smith and I live here in Cornwall. I have severe COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which makes me one of more than 1 million other people like that in the UK. I wanted to talk to you today about why it means so much to me and people like me that we have a strong and ambitious air quality directive. When you can't breathe, nothing else matters. And with all the will in the world that the best of medication and following all the self-management advice that the doctors give us can't protect us from pollution. It is a serious problem for us and can cause early death, obviously. We do get sometimes on the weather forecast on TV or on the computer a message from perhaps the British Lung Foundation to warn us that it's a high ozone day or a high pollution day, to stay indoors and keep our windows shut. But of course we can't live like that all year round, and sometimes we have to go outdoors no matter how high the pollution. Not only that, but you're not always forewarned, especially if it's local pollution. So what does this mean for me and people like me? Well, first off, even though you can't see it, we often know once we're out in it if it is a high pollution day, because suddenly our breathing will become harder and harder. We feel extremely tired, and if we don't get indoors soon, we can have what's called an exacerbation. This means that apart from the increased rapid breathing and the such like, our oxygen levels might fall, and we can end up in hospital with pneumonia. The outcome of this scenario might be good. We might be ventilated and we might recover and come home. But even so, it means another drop in lung function and more progression of our disease, another step along the ladder. And that's the good outcome. The other outcome, of course, is that in hospital we're ventilated, we have severe pneumonia, but we don't make it. And I have to say that in the last year or two, I've had many friends, many COPD friends that I speak to on the internet that have passed away. And they're not necessarily elderly. Many of us are only in our 40s, 50s and so on. Some of us have, like me, have the hereditary form of emphysema called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. And our lungs are very open to insult from anything, whether it's using bleach or ammonia in the house or whether it's pollution in the air outdoors. Our lungs just don't have the natural protection to protect us from these pollutants. And we know that they're slowly killing us, but there is nothing we can do about it. And again, this is why it's imperative for us that such directives as you're all working on now go through and are enacted as soon as possible. It may be too late for me and a lot of my friends, but hopefully in the coming years, for those that come after me, things will be better. It's hard to speak actually without notes, and it's hard to speak about such a personally emotive issue. I hope you'll forgive her. my poor delivery of what I want to say. I wanted to point out another aspect of this, because I know we have to be practical. From the point of view of here in the UK, we're having huge problems with the increase in ER admissions. Many of these admissions, I think COPD is the second highest rate of emergency room admissions, and this is always when it's due to an exacerbation. Now, I am not saying that every exacerbation in COPD is caused by outdoor pollution. Clearly it's not. It can be viral and bacterial and so on, but a large number are caused by pollution. It's a trigger. We go out, there's too much diesel or ozone, or I'm not a scientist, I don't know all the different terms, but I do know what it does to us, and I do know that we suddenly feel that tightening and we can't breathe, and we know we're in trouble. And as they say, when you can't breathe, nothing else matters. You have to experience it really to understand just how bad it is. I know I'm not going to play the innocent. I saw you on our local TV last night in the Inside Out programme. I think you were talking about the agricultural aspects of pollution. Obviously, although most people immediately think of the big cities and the diesel, they tend to forget that it can be just as bad in the countryside. And of course, for me, living in a small town in Cornwall, on the edge of a small town in Cornwall, surrounded by farmland, I know well that we can have problems here due to agriculture, because I experience it myself. I can go out and peg a couple of items on the washing line, and I know I've got to get back indoors. Now, again, I'm not going to over-egg it. It's not an everyday occurrence, but it happens frequently. And if I don't pay attention to the signs quickly, well, basically it can step by step lead to death. I'm not going to pussyfoot around that. This is a serious issue for me and for people like me. On the other hand, I have friends that work in the farming community, and obviously I'm surrounded by farmers as well as farmland. So, I know it's not easy. I know people fight for their livelihoods. I know people don't like change. Look at all the smoking legislation in recent years. This has been wonderful for people with COPD, even though many of them will have been smokers and not liked it at the time, but people do, they accept change when it comes, at the end of the day, they accept it, and we're all the better for it. So I'm hoping, even though there are going to be farmers that don't want this to go through, or at least they want it all weakened down, please keep in mind that for some of us, it's not just about making things a bit more difficult if the directive goes through. Our life doesn't just get a bit more difficult because of pollution. It's literally a matter of life and death for many of us. The other thing is, and I only recently found this out because of what you were saying last night, is that I understand in the Netherlands they've got agricultural emissions down by about 50% in recent years. So that makes me think it's doable. Even if people aren't overjoyed at the thought of it, it is doable. And when I think of other things that are happening, like the smoking ban in cars, all sorts of things currently happening to improve the health of our nation, I just think it would tie in so well. I think now is the time to do this. For example, there's all the furore in the news at the moment about the diesel emissions from the Volkswagen cars, and drivers are quite shocked that they've been hoodwinked about the emissions, and people really are. I think the population generally really is becoming more aware of the impact of pollution on all, not just those of us with COPD, but on everyone, especially small children, you know, little children's lungs. And from the COPD perspective, we now know that many of us, it's decided before we're even born, it's decided in the womb that we're going to have weak lungs, smaller lungs, and so on. Quite often, yes, if the mother has smoked, but quite apart from that, even with non-smoking parents, from the effect of pollution, women that live in high pollution areas, in inner city areas, especially where homes open straight, the front door opens straight onto a busy street in a city, they're breathing in all this pollution, and it does affect the fetus in the womb, and it affects the formation of the lungs. I know I've gone off on a tangent a bit there, but you know, I just wanted to mention that not everybody's aware of it. So, you know, I have my oxygen. I have all sorts of medication that I take religiously every day. I really stick to my medication routine. I've taken on board all the self-management advice. I'm a great believer in self-management. I try to walk as far as I can every day, even though I might look relaxed sitting down. The moment I stand up and start walking, I'm breathing as hard as someone that's just ran a race. You know, it's really hard and it's uncomfortable, but I do it because I know exercise is good for me. And many of my peers, many other people with COPD are trying their hardest too. The ones that have got COPD because they've smoked, they've given up smoking, they're taking the medication, they're exercising, and they're hoping against hope that they will still have a number of productive years left in their lives. But as I said at the beginning, we can't control what's in the air when we step out the door, or even in the house to a large degree, because, you know, shut your windows, do what you may, if it's there in the air, it's there, and there's nothing you can do. Also, I wanted to mention from the economic point of view, many of us do still work. I stopped working a few years ago when I went on oxygen. But those with mild and moderate and perhaps severe COPD that aren't yet on oxygen, that are still in work, they have to have a lot of time off because of exacerbations, and it's the frequency of these exacerbations that, as in my case, usually lead to us giving up work, because you end up being sick and unable to work more often than you're able. It just becomes impossible. And of course, as I mentioned before, with each exacerbation there is a step down in our lung function that's permanent. We might recover in that we feel better after the exacerbation, but when they test our lungs at the next 6-monthly checkup, our lung function has declined yet again, until eventually it gets too low to go on, really. I fear I haven't put my case across as well as somebody who does this professionally or is part of a union or whatever would be able to do. I've done my best talking to you from the heart. Not just for me, I know it's probably too late for me, but for the others that are just coming through being diagnosed with this wretched illness. Some of who still have children at home growing up. My own daughter is at university at the moment. Some of who won't be lucky enough to see their children grow up, particularly the ones with the hereditary form of COPD. They're doing all they can to stay alive and to have the most productive life they can. Please keep us in mind when you make your decisions about this directive. Please do what you can for us. I'll be really, really most grateful for any help that you can give us. Thank you. I'm sorry for the tears, but please remember, life starts and life ends with a breath, and that breathing is the one thing that every person that is born must be able to do, to continue. It is so important. It is more important than the economics. It's more important than anything. So I know you're not a miracle worker, but please, please do what you can for us and keep us in mind. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.